Welcome to the event. We want to make sure you have the best experience possible while at the show today. So here are a few important notes on how to use the platform and, more importantly, engage with attendees, speakers, and sponsors. The webcast is being streamed through your computer, so for the best audio quality, please make sure your volume is up. First, let's set up your profile. Select Profile in the upper right corner. Add a photo and confirm your time zone so that sessions appear in your local time. What's that sound? You'll receive notification alerts throughout the event. This could be when you've received an email or chat or earned a badge. These pop up automatically in the top right corner, and you can also go to the Communications Center dropdown under your profile picture in the upper right to find your notices. Looking for more content outside of the sessions? Explore our virtual library or visit the Content Hub. Here you can download assets made available by our event partners. Finally, let's take a look at your briefcase. You can select Briefcase under your initials or photo in the top right corner to access documents you've saved throughout the event. If you need assistance, please visit the Help area in the event. Lastly, have fun. We're looking forward to seeing you at your next session.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to day 2 here at the Private Wireless Network Summit presented by FierceWireless. Great to see a lot of you joining us here from yesterday, and welcome to those of you in the first session. My name is Alejandro Piñero, your host, and we're going to talk about Open RAN private networks this morning. Open RAN, of course, a big topic, a lot of hype, and I can't wait to hear how this infrastructure change or rethink can affect, improve, and help develop private networks going forward. To help us discuss this, of course, a special thank you to our sponsors, Rakuten and Red Hat, for their support in this session. Well, we have a great 45-minute panel lined up coming up. It's going to be hosted by Viet Nguyen from 5G Americas, and he's joined by executives from Mitre, Red Hat, GXC, and Rakuten Symphony. As always, I know I'm like a broken record, but we love to hear from you. So do send your comments and your thoughts over on the chat window on the left-hand side there to talk to your fellow attendees. And if you have a question for Viet and the rest of the team, you can send those directly to them using the chat function, apologies, the Q&A function just on the left there as well. They'll receive the questions directly, and we'll try to get those included in the discussion as well. All right, well, let's get on with the panel. I know there's a lot to get through, so I don't want to take any more time. Viet and to the rest of the team, off you go. Thanks.
Thanks so much, everybody, and welcome this morning and afternoon to everybody who's joining us for this wonderful panel discussion that we have here at the FierceWireless event. Our panel this morning is Open RAN Private Networks, and I'm joined here today with a very esteemed group of guests here. My name is Viet Nguyen, and I'm the Vice President of Public Relations and Technology at 5G Americas. We're a trade association that works with network operators and equipment manufacturers and service providers throughout the Americas region. And I'm joined again here today with some great folks, Dr. Venki Ramaswamy from Mitre, Mehran Hadipour from Rakuten Symphony Alexis Di Taloy from Red Hat and Hardik Jain from GXC. The way I'm just sort of going to set this up is we'll do a quick round of intros and talk to us a little bit about yourself and your organization. And then we'll go into starting to talk about a few different topics and issues around Open RAN private networks. And then we're going to leave a few minutes for some questions and answers at the end of the event. So why don't I just start with you, Venki? Why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your organization?
Thank you, Viet. And my name is Venki Ramaswamy. I'm the Chief Technologist for NextG at MITRE Labs. And I am in charge of all R&D activity related to 5G and 6G and beyond. For those of you who have not heard about MITRE, MITRE is a nonprofit organization working in the public interest. That means that we provide unbiased technological advice to the different federal agencies that come under the U.S. government. And most of the clients that we serve are very much interested in private networks and so on, and they're also interested in how this new paradigm of Open RAN can help them achieve the goals that they want to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mehran, over to you.
Thank you. Mehran Hadipour, a pleasure to be part of this panel. I run global business development for Rakuten Symphony. Symphony is a component, one of the divisions for Rakuten, which is also an operator. Our mission is to build infrastructure and software solutions to deliver mobile as software to different enterprises and end user customers. And I'm focusing on both alliances and business development side for technology providers, solution delivery, and go-to-market function.
Great. Thank you. And Alexis.
Hello, everyone. Great to be part of this panel. So I'm Alexis de Talouette. I'm a solution architect, part of Red Hat. I help organizations and mostly service providers here in Canada. I'm coming from one of these service providers before joining Red Hat a couple of years ago. And our claim to fame at Red Hat is really to provide the open hybrid cloud platform that can span any type of environment. And we've been in the, working with service providers for quite some time now, starting at the NFV timeframe with OpenStack. And now we see this evolving, of course, with Edge, and we've distributed some of the radio access network components. And so what we're striving for is to, help organizations adopt all these new technologies and foster that adoption through a more streamlined deployment on a common platform.
Great, thank you. And Hardik?
Hello, everybody. My name is Hardik Jain. I'm one of the co-founder and CTO of GXC. GXC is a company based in Austin, Texas, in the US. We are a private network solutions provider where we provide the RAN system and the core network system along with network management. And we're using Open RAN and delivering Open RAN systems for private networks. And super excited to be on this panel and looking forward to a good discussion.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Again, a really great panel, and looking forward to hearing some of your thoughts on some of these ideas and concerns and questions that we have here. So I'd like to just maybe start off with a real general question for everybody here. So really, what are Open RAN private networks, and how do they sort of differ from traditional cellular networks? Maybe we'll start with Venki. Any thoughts here? Oops, it looks like your audio is off there.
Oh, sorry about that. And so let me start with what my views on private networks are, right? So private networks are networks that are created or are configured to provide the benefits for a given industry use case. So it is customized for a given application, so to speak. And the philosophy of public networks, is that it's one size fits all. Right? So that's what I think. When we design public networks, that's a philosophy that we use. Right? We want to maximize the resources, the usage of resources. We want to make sure that they have everybody has enough capacity and coverage and so on. Whereas when we develop private networks, the focus is really on the benefits that networks can provide to a given application or given use case, for example. As opposed to one size fits all, the philosophy of private networks is one size fits none. So that we have to develop something that is very specific to that use case, vertical, and so on. The advantages, in my opinion, is enhanced coverage capacity, but it's also very much tailored security, privacy, and things like that, which you may or may not get from a public network.
Great, that's very concise. Hardik, tell us a little bit about how you sort of characterize open RAN private networks and how they differ.
Yeah, thank you. Like building up on what Venki said, private networks are not like small versions of public telco networks. They have, from a feature set perspective, very different requirements. And we think of private networks as coming from an enterprise networking perspective. So thinking through how wired and Wi-Fi networks are used today by enterprises to build a local area network or outside a little bit of a wide area network in industrial application. We think of the whole stack to be the cellular network stack to work well with the existing enterprise networking stack. And then that's a very important distinction where from a product feature perspective. And then from a use case perspective, private networks have massively different use cases. Like public networks are mainly built for downlink data consumption. In the last decade, we have had significant increase in downlink data consumption in terms of video. Private networks, on the other hand, have a variety of use cases. Some of them requiring very heavy uplink requirements, and so I would say it allows an enterprise an opportunity to tune the network for specific applications, which are very, very different. And so for both from use case and product features perspective, we as an industry have to look at building solutions that scale like how other enterprise networking technologies have in the past.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Alexis, any thoughts here on you really focus in on a lot on the software end of things. Do you see any sort of differences on the private network side versus what you might see working with a traditional operator or an MNO?
Yes, and before just answering this, I want to zoom out and talk about the Open RAN aspect here, really, of this panel, right, of the private network. If we look at Open RAN, I think there is two main goals. One of them is the functional split of the RAN, disaggregated the baseband, and the second one is the cloudification of the RAN. And so this is really where software companies such as Red Hat also are coming into the play. And in terms of differences, the benefit really of that disaggregation and cloudification of the RAN is to enable really flexible deployment. So you have new ways or bringing the agility to scale up or down that private network based on demand, based on use cases, as we just heard from Hardik. And one of the main goal as well of Open RAN private network is to bring the cost-effective aspect. Because now with Open RAN, you have enablement for open innovation, because you can swap pieces of the solution and make vendors compete against themselves. And so that will bring cost hopefully down in terms of purchasing the various components. Now, maybe we'll talk later some of the challenges that it brings as well, but I'll stop here and we'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, and over to you, Mehran. Maybe some thoughts here.
Sure. I think with regards to the original question of what make private networks different, there's a couple of things to consider in lieu of how they differ from the traditional mobile network delivery. Private networks are generally focused on specific applications and use cases, as was mentioned. What makes that unique is that there are many applications that are emerging that require low latency and local data processing. The so-called stateful edge applications, things like computer vision, smart manufacturing, smart city, and so on. The data is generated at a high intensity at the edge, and the private network is trying to provide a low latency connection in a variety of environments in a consistent way to support data processing of those applications. So that's very different than providing, text and talk for in a general population that the mobile providers are providing. So the use case pattern is different. So the other thing that's very different is that it is really needs to be deployed as a service. When you think about the consumption of the private network, there's very little resources of technology resources and also scale resources at the edge. So these have to be delivered as a service, remotely managed, end-to-end orchestrated, whether it's Open RAN or some other infrastructure, it has to be almost turnkey. If you're building a network in an airport or an event, so on, it needs to be as much in a box as possible. So those are the differences we see. And what we try to do is to try to build automation in the software stack. So when the networks are delivered, lifecycle operations, application provisioning, all those things are automated beyond just in the connectivity.
Excellent. So I think you all alluded to many benefits that we that we can sort of see here that that Open RAN could potentially bring to private networks. As we sort of think about the status of these deployments, it seems like we're still fairly early on in many of these deployments. But maybe you could talk to us a little bit about where we are, how the status of these deployments are looking, and sort of like what are the key trends. Maybe as you sort of talk about this, maybe you can weave in some of the challenges of how these deployments have been going. Does anybody want to take on that first question? If not, I can call on someone. Yeah, go ahead, Vicky.
Sure. So first of all, the terminology that 3GPP uses is non-public network, right? And there are a couple of different models by which you could actually deploy this. So it could be a standalone led by the enterprise itself. It could be a standalone led by the operator, or it could be a hybrid version where both operator assets are used in an enterprise setting. And if you look at the second category, where the operators are the one deploying or launching the private networks, there are analysts that claim that about 12% of the total operators of the world have deployed the private networks as of today. It's not a big number, but the thing to keep in mind that number is actually increasing at quite a rapid pace. So it's a good news, but as of today, it's only very small percentage of that the total deployment scenarios. The second category, where it's the enterprise led, where the enterprises themselves are actually getting the equipment and things like that and doing it themselves. That's also a very small number. Today I think based on the numbers that I've seen, it's about 250 enterprises that have actually done. And if you look at why this is not taking off at the rate that we expect, I would say that one, it's because of the non-availability of the spectrum. So in the US, we have CBRS spectrum that is dedicated for private networks. In Germany, we have some local licenses and things like that. There are countries where they have made spectrum available, and there are other countries where there is no private network spectrum available, so they will have to depend on the operator. So that's in terms of where we stand today with respect to the 5G private network deployment. If you look at the industries that are actually leaders in that, and I would say that manufacturing is really the one that is predominantly deploying 5G private networks. My estimates are that there are about 40% of the total deployments are related to manufacturing. The other one that is quickly picking up is the services vertical. So services is like healthcare, education, public safety, and smart cities in general. So those are the other applications that are coming, and there is also a small percentage of all the utilities companies that are looking at this. So that's where the split of different verticals that are adopting private network. I would say that the challenges itself, one, it's the complexity associated with it, because operators and the enterprises themselves are not very used to deploying these kind of things, and it's a complex situation or complex scenario, because you are trying to optimize a network for a given situation, right? So this optimization is important. You need to know which knobs to actually turn on and off and dial. So because that will come with an expertise of a given operator or something like that. So that would be there. People are also concerned about the maturity of these technologies, right? So, when we talk about Open RAN and private networks, people, or at least the verticals, are not very clear how mature these technologies are. And the last thing that I would also point out, based on my discussion, is the cost, right? So we see a lot of claims with respect to cost, but it's not really clear to our customers whether or not this is going to improve the cost efficiency and so on. So, three major challenges: complexity, I would say, and then the second one is gaps in skills to maintain and manage these things, and the last one would be cost.
And you mentioned spectrum too, availability of spectrum for those. Yeah, so very significant challenges. Hardik, maybe that was a very actually comprehensive answer. Hardik, do you have anything maybe you want to add, maybe from what you've seen in terms of sort of the status or of these deployments?
Yeah, I think I would agree with Venki that it's been early days for private ORAN based private networks, and early days even for 5G private networks. And it's primarily driven in from my perspective also by the end user device ecosystem availability. So like, for example, most smartphones today do support 5G. However, when it comes to industrial use cases, those end user gateways or routers or other sensors, they still don't have 5G capability. So, and that is something that would improve in the next coming years. And so it's just, as an industry, I feel like we need to continue to build these solutions, and slowly it'll scale to where we want it to go.
Excellent. Alexis, do you see anything on the software end of things in regards to these challenges that we're seeing in these deployments?
So definitely, there is aspect about the interoperability that is not yet fully mature, right? As the Open RAN is still evolving, standardizing all these interfaces. I think Hardik mentioned to this as well about the ecosystem not always being up to speed with the latest capabilities, right, to interoperate the various components. So there is definitely one aspect here when it comes to software. The second aspect, I would say, is also probably around security, right? As you disaggregate, then there is a larger surface of attack. But I'll let that maybe for later in the panel. I just wanted to highlight two trends that we've seen in terms of adoption of private network. So these two trends are not specific to Open RAN private network, but still are, as we said, right, private network as a whole is being questioned as its adoption. And the trends we've seen is really, for instance, the CBRS-based neutral host network, right? Using multiple operator core network. So when you want to have seamless handoff of your mobility traffic from your private network, say infrastructure that resides in a university or in a specific industrial plant, and you want to have seamless handoff over the MNO network, I think there is one trend here that we're seeing more and more, the adoption of that multiple operator core network. And the second one we're seeing is the ability for now MVNO, and so this is happening more in the US because of that CBRS available spectrum. But the MVNO now can use the CBRS spectrum to offload, right, some of their radio consumption off the tier 1 MNO. So that helps with reducing some of their cost structure. I think these are two key trends in terms of adoption of private network. There are various use cases popping here and there. There's a lot of theoretical one, couple of one that materialized, but it's still early days.
All right. All right. Yeah, absolutely. And then Mehran, any thoughts in terms of what you're seeing in terms of key trends?
Actually, few, yeah. I might have a little bit different perspective on some of the folks in the panel on this, given the fact that we actually deployed over 4,600 5G disaggregated containerized network in production today. I see the solution perspective and also the cost benefit perspective being a resolve action. We do see the benefit. We saw, compared to what we did in 4G, significant benefits for Open RAN, disaggregation, containerization, and orchestration automation. We saw, almost 30-40% Capex reduction, the deployment time, 80% reduction in deployment available. Now the question becomes exactly how it then translates into open private networks. And the other trend that we see is that many MNOs and operators looking to monetize incremental services beyond 5G, because 5G is not a good increase your ARPU very much. You have to figure out where other funds that come from. They look at the edge service delivery as a way to do that. And private networks could definitely play that edge service delivery. We see a big trend of applications emerging that require low latency, and Wi-Fi would not work in many cases in terms of deployment, logistics, and so on. So private 5G networks would evolve to support that, driven by the application demand, not as much by connectivity. That's why we feel that many of these apps that people are deploying, like smart retail or location-based services, or industrial use cases such as ports and underground, or things of that nature that requires active data processing to support, and low latency connection is important. 5G private network would be the solution for that.
Excellent. Actually, I want to stay with you on this, because I think you've got some really good insight in terms of where these benefits sort of play into. But could you talk a little bit about what the role is then for Open RAN for a private network, right? Or what is that benefit over something that is maybe not an Open RAN network, aside from the being able to select your different vendors that for the different pieces of the network. Is there anything else that you're sort of seeing there that's from a benefit standpoint?
Actually, I see like three distinct benefits for Open RAN as it relates to private network. One is that Open RAN architectures dictate a disaggregated network deployment. The ability to segregate CU and DU workloads and then consolidate them has significant benefit in terms of deployment model for things like widespread rural deployment or factory automation platforms that the radios have to be placed certain location, but the data processing can happen. The CU can be centralized. So this multi-tier, disaggregated model that is part of the Open RAN deployment would have unique benefits for private network. That's one. Second, I think that with the infrastructure and cost model of running Open RAN on standard x86 platform, connecting to backend systems, and a continuous reduction in infrastructure costs as new generation of hardware becomes available, is going to be a major enabler of Open RAN private network. The customized hardware and software stack provided by a few providers not only won't scale, but also cannot adopt new applications, new requirements. And we actually deployed Open RAN on the infrastructure for, not more than a few years, see a significant trend in improvement and progress, both on infrastructure cost and so the agility of being able to adopt new use cases is very unique to Open RAN. And then lastly, I think there's a number of technologies that are being built for supporting the operators for Open RAN around orchestration and automation. That is a must-have to have a private network deployment. Things like zero-touch provisioning at the far edge, being able to bootstrap a piece of hardware sitting in a factory floor with operating system, Kubernetes applications, and network functions on top, and manage its life cycle centrally is essential to be able to run an Open RAN environment, because nobody's going to be able to. It has to be as turnkey as possible. It also has to be a network in the box, and you have to have that capability. And all of that is being built as part of the Open RAN initiatives by many of the software providers, including Red Hat and Symphony. So those are the three things I think that are essential, I think.
Well said. Well said. I think those are very, very significant points that you make there. I want to go over to Vinky here. You mentioned a little bit earlier that you're seeing, in terms of key trends, about 40% of some of these early deployments happening in sort of the manufacturing space. Could you maybe drill down a little bit in terms of your thoughts on what some of the use cases are that you're seeing happening with these deployments in that particular vertical?
Yeah, sure. So before that, I would also like to comment on what Mehran said. I completely agree with what Mehran said, right? So the advantage of using Open RAN, openness, is that you get additional level of programmability. And what that programmability gives you is the ability to do things like zero-touch automation. And that has been a pain point for many of our customers because, as I said before, this is a very complex system, right? And you want to be able to do the configurations and management in a very autonomous way. And Open RAN is something that is providing us that kind of a capability. The second thing I would also like to add is that in applications like smart cities, the key aspect is data, right? And with Open RAN architecture, you are getting more visibility into what is happening in the network. You are getting more visibility or more ability to collect data and so on, which is also something that an Open RAN based architecture would provide you. So these to us are the availability of more data, availability of more, or visibility of the network itself, and the ability to control the network and orchestrate and manage it. It's a key aspect that ORAN based architecture would provide you. Now, coming to the manufacturing, what we have seen is that precision control is something that I think there is a lot of desire for in the manufacturing aspect. I would also say that in manufacturing there is also a need for things like video collection, and so this is exactly what Hardik was talking in the beginning, right? There are applications where there is a lot of uplink traffic. And the specific thing that we have seen is that in a typical network, the uplink to downlink ratio. This is a configuration that you can do in the uplink downlink slot ratio, right? So you could say that in a TDD based system, you could have 50% uplink and 50% downlink. That's a typical public network scenario. But in a private network where there's a lot of video collection, what we are seeing is that there is a desire for maybe 80% uplink slot configuration versus 50%, right? So that's a scenario that we have seen in the past where the operators wanted to have a very high uplink ratio. The second one is I would say that the need for more coverage and more capacity. So there are areas in the manufacturing floor or the industry floor where there's very less coverage, and how can you boost coverage in those areas? The last one, I would say that it's more also about network roaming capabilities, where you can you have the same user moving in and out of the private and the public network, and there is a desire for moving in and out of the private and public network in a seamless fashion. So these are some of the things that we have seen with respect to manufacturing. So precise control, very high resiliency and robustness, and the need for roaming.
Excellent. Those are very good points. I actually want to move over to Alexis on this one too. In terms of some of the specific use cases or specific industries, where are you sort of seeing a lot of this activity happening for your particular customers or the folks that you work with?
I would say to build on what we heard so far, I will add everything that is also in the utility twin building, wireless networking business. There is a lot of application ranging from, for instance, building maintenance, where we have a lot of wireless sensors. This is, collecting data from temperature, humidity, environment factors to try to help maintain the overall environment. This, coupled with, of course, the industry 4.0, right? This is the IoT movement, and with Narrowband IoT, bringing that with the private 5G capabilities, now we have more of a comprehensive offering for the specific in-building use cases. Another one might be monitoring to security, right? Of course, I think this is what you mentioned just now about the video surveillance, the analytics, the on-demand ability to track or to do machine learning. And another one, of course, is the interaction between machine to anything type of interaction. And so this is where really private network overall can help foster these capabilities, because it offers a more reliable, it offers quality of service among these applications. And I think Mehran was absolutely on spot when saying that it's really also about the application being deployed at the edge. That's one of the value, right, of that distribution or disaggregation of the RAN, and with the Open RAN, the ability to start placing application in the rig so you can get immediately real-time data out of the network and take some action with it. So this is really where we're seeing, probably to add some of the value, the ecosystem being built around, and it's an ecosystem both of application, so a new type of use cases that I just discussed, but it's also an ecosystem of new vendors. And I think that's one of the benefits of Open RAN, right? We're seeing some new vendors providing now new capabilities and new flexibility to build first the automation that Mehran very well articulated, because now we can automate the application placement and we can automate tracking, the KPIs for the various use cases we have. So I'll pause here. I think I'll hand it over back to you, Viet, but these are the areas where we're seeing some momentum.
Excellent. And actually, before you pass over, I'm wondering if you might be able to answer a question that we just got in here. I'll read it out here. Alexis, if you're not comfortable, but you did mention narrowband IoT. But let me read this question of what's your view on narrowband IoT and RedCap adoption into Open RAN? Sort of given the drag on implementation. Do you think that's a fair question? Is it in terms of the assessment and the uptake here, or Any thoughts?
Well, we're definitely seeing some more adoption about narrowband IoT for everything that is industrial. We've seen some of partnership happening already in the industry. For instance, Siemens in Europe for everything that is automotive and that type of industry for manufacturing as well. Specifically about the view on narrowband IoT with RedCap, I'm not sure. I'm myself very involved within the O-RAN space when it comes to cloudification and orchestration. So I can't really answer the specific aspect of how narrowband IoT and RedCap are getting adopted into O-RAN. So I'll let that maybe to others. But from a cloudification standpoint and orchestration standpoint, I think we're agnostic to the type of protocol used under the hood.
Okay. Maybe we'll let others address that. Looks like we have had Mehran just drop there for a second. Let's go to Hardik in terms of your thoughts and where you're sort of seeing the activity happening in the different verticals here. Anything you want to add to where folks are talking about?
Yeah, the way we're seeing it is enterprises generally have a very good connectivity in mostly carpeted environments. Wi-Fi has very good connectivity also. End user device ecosystem is really good. Where we're seeing the basic lack of coverage and connectivity is on uncarpeted environment, and especially outdoor environments. Where there is like maybe existing systems may have like Wi-Fi and other technologies may not have enough bandwidth or enough range or enough coverage. And so private networks allow us to solve that. There's also O-RAN allowing us to have various types of radios or capabilities of radios, whether it be industrial, low power, medium power, high power, that can be used with a similar RAN software system, allow us to solve that problem. And that's kind of like one basic problem. Like, for example, if you take warehouses, instead of having hundreds of Wi-Fi access points today, you could do that with like 5 or 6x less number of cellular access points, just to provide the good connectivity. And it all comes from like all the decades of improvements in the UE stack and the radio stack that have happened to improve the reliability of the connection. And just mostly seeing use cases where connectivity has been challenged and improving that connectivity, driving other things like automation and better business operation.
Great. So a lot of coverage related issues here. There's that actually relates to one of the questions that we just received here, and this one is actually for you, Hardik. Wondering if you might be able to take this one on. And the question is this: what do you think about the 5G extenders for private networks, and especially about millimeter wave, maybe 28 gigahertz ones versus the smaller GMBs? Do they decrease the capacity of the network? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the primary since private networks are in the kind of the early innings, like providing a full coverage is like it is one of the main important things. Like somebody who's installing the network or providing a network could do to an enterprise, because coverage is super important. The other aspect to it is how hard it is to deploy networks. So in certain cases, like enterprises have a really good backhaul infrastructure or wired infrastructure indoors on buildings. When it comes out to outdoor and in campuses kind of environment, they may not have backhaul available or fiber available. And so extending that coverage, whether by using repeaters or using mesh systems or IAB systems, will be critical in terms of expanding those coverages. Again, reducing that Capex that they may have to do initially, and just getting out and deploying with the least amount of friction. And I want to kind of harp on the point, like for operators, it's like a completely opposite problem. Operators have good coverage outdoor, bad coverage indoors. Enterprises have completely opposite problem: good coverage indoor, bad coverage outdoor. And so any way we can solve that and provide connectivity would be crucial for private networks to continue to build the momentum.
Excellent, excellent. So we're closing in on time here, but I'm just going to take one last question here, and this one is actually pretty interesting. Some of you mentioned a little bit earlier the need for additional spectrum, in particular for these deployments. With a lot of these early deployments for private networks happening in CBRS, the question here is NRU still being looked at? And is that a potential possibility down the line here for some of these private networks? Does anybody want to take on the question of NRU, NR unlicensed spectrum? How about you, Venki? Any thoughts there from that?
Sure. So NRU is definitely an option that people or enterprises are considering, especially in places where there is no private spectrum. However, NRU is I don't even know if it's now part of 5G. And even if it's part of 5G, I think the ecosystem for NRU is very immature. So we don't have systems that are actually working. We did have that for LTE. So the LTE, there was multi-fire, LTU NR, and things like that. But for 5G, I don't know the maturity. If once it becomes available, it would definitely be an interesting option. I would also like to point out that we do have Wi-Fi today, right? So we do have Wi-Fi, and we do have ways by which we can integrate Wi-Fi with a 5G system, right? Using things like N3 IWF, non-3GPP interworking gateways. There are scenarios where they could, or the enterprises could use Wi-Fi, but have 5G networking or the 5G core control this Wi-Fi access point, because you still have the issues with Wi-Fi that you will have with NRU. However, the mobility management and things like that are now controlled by the 5G core. So you would get by adopting a Wi-Fi solution integrated with the 5G core, you would get the same benefits as you would get from NRU. So it's a possibility, but as I said, these are all very in a very early stage, and the enterprises are always looking for things that are mature, that they have guarantees and things like that, right? So that's an issue. One of the things that I would also point out that often the enterprises have the requirement that your 5G network interface with their existing business and operational networks, right? Because in many of the industry use cases, they cannot touch some of the existing sub-networks because they have very long shelf life, so to speak. And those are very mission critical systems that they don't want to touch. So the requirement that we are seeing is that anything that we introduce as a new technology, 5G private network, for example, has to coexist with existing networks. And and when they do that, they have to operate in such a way that all the management and orchestration that we're talking about applies to not only the new technology but also old technology. That's a very challenging problem. So that's something that we are looking at. We are dealing with it, but that is that's something that we often forget, but it's a very important aspect for many of the enterprises.
Fantastic, and a great way to, I think, sort of wrap up our conversation here. I think there's definitely a lot of different options that enterprises have on the board in front of them, both in terms of Open RAN, but also in terms of access technologies, both on cellular and with Wi-Fi. And so I would actually like to really extend my thanks to the audience and my thanks to the other panelists on today's panel. You guys are fantastic. You're real experts in this, and I think that would love to have another conversation at some point with you all. So again, I'll turn it over back to the host and for the rest of the event.
Wonderful. Thank you, Viet, and of course to our colleagues from Meteor, Red Hat, GXC, and Rakuten Symphony for that wonderful discussion. And as I mentioned at the top, thank you, of course, to our sponsors, Rakuten and Red Hat, for their support. Well, this session has concluded, but there's more to come. Join us back at 2 p.m. Eastern, that's just in a little while, where we'll be talking specifically about private networks in the transport and logistics industry. So we look forward to seeing you then. Until then, thanks again for joining us, and take care.